Hi, everyone. Welcome to World Rainforest Day. Our next event today is called Game Changers. We're going to be talking about scalable impact and the new models that are driving this, this very, very important aspect for ending deforestation before 2030. My very esteemed guests, I am honored to participate in this panel with, include John Perkins and Nathan Havey. And before we kind of get to introductions, I did want to thank Singularity Group. And we have the Singularity Group think tank that this is our first event of a series. And so without them, this event would not have gone on. This think tank is about ending deforestation and open up to the entire global community. So if you're interested in joining, please reach out to us. I'll have some information at the end. And obviously a big, huge thanks to World Rainforest Day and Rainforest Partnership that helped found this event. That is incredibly important. And last year reached 29 million people. We're hoping we'll reach many, many more this year. And last but not least, also wanted to thank Yunity Labs, which is sponsoring some impact projects we'll talk a little bit about today with Singularity Group and the think tank. And we hope that the community gets very, very involved. It's open to everyone. Okay, so that being said, I will introduce myself. I'm Ani Chahal Honan. I am a co-founder of Yunity. I am also a global ambassador for the XPRIZE Foundation and Singularity Group. I help lead the Singularity Group chapter here in Seattle, which is where I have home base. I have spent a good part of my career really working across innovative technologies, and I've been part of exits and acquisitions as a creator, advisor, and investor upwards of 49 billion. So I'm very honored with the projects that I'm involved in, and I'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing at Yunity. My esteemed guest, John Perkins, is a New York Times bestselling author of many books. I'm actually going to read all of what we think is incredible about you, John. Economist, author, activist, and formerly chief economist at major consulting firms. You've been advisor to the World Bank, the UN, the IMF, Fortune 500 corporations, leaders of countries across Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, and the US government. You've written 11 books, including, as I said, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, Touching the Jaguar, Shape-Shifting. Your books have spent over 70 weeks on the New York Times bestselling list, sold well over 2 million copies. We are so honored to have you here, John. I also want to introduce you all to Nathan Havey. He is absolutely incredible. He is the award-winning filmmaker of Beyond Zero, an incredible story of the CEO of Interface and how they went from a company, a carpet company, to one of the most sustainable organizations on the planet. He's also producer of the acclaimed podcast miniseries, 10 Things You Should Know About Stakeholder Capitalism. He is also co-created and co-facilitated the consultant certification program for Conscious Capitalism, Inc., cultivating a global network of consultants who are transforming business around the world into stakeholder capitalism, co-founder of the Institute for Corporate Transformation and 100 Months for Change. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
And so today as I said, we're going to be talking about game changers and the scalable new models for impact. And, I hope that we'll also kind of bring in our collective experience and what we're doing and what we're seeing in the world today. And so we're going to do kind of an interesting roundtable. So we're going to have free flow conversation and just see how it goes. So I'm going to start off today with you, John, and ask you a couple of questions. One, you are kind of the original OG game changer. When we think about what you've done as a founder of nonprofit Dream Change and the Pachamama Alliance, and what these organizations have done to actually partner with Indigenous communities and leaders to really protect some of the most sacred and important rainforests in the world. It's so interesting because you're a self-professed economic hitman. And so our question to you, I have two questions. One, through the 80s and 90s, there was a bit of focus on we have to preserve and save our rainforests. And then that attention died down. And you have spent your life, most of your life as an activist, pushing the world to transform from a death economy to a life economy. And so our question is, why do you think that attention died off until very recently? And what do we need to do to change our focus and attention here?
Well, thanks, Annie, and it's great to be here with you and with Nathan. Incidentally, Nathan, I'm a great admirer of your film Beyond Zero. It's a magnificent film. First of all, I think it's important what is a death economy? A death economy is an economic system that really is based on a goal of maximizing short-term profits for corporations, regardless of the social and environmental costs, and also really maximizing materialistic consumption for all of us individuals. That's kind of what we're brought up to believe in. And it has created an economic situation that's untenable. It is the problem behind climate change. Climate change, income inequality, species extinction, environmental destruction, including rainforest destruction. These are all just symptoms of the greater disease, which is this death economy. And it's really a global economic, social, governmental system that we've bought into. A life economy, on the other hand, is an economic system that pays people to clean up pollution, to regenerate destroyed environments, to create new technologies that don't ravage the earth. And one of the reasons that the rainforest is so important is obviously because they sequester carbon dioxide. We need those plants, we need those rainforests. But beyond that is the symbolism, the spiritualism, let's say, that the fact that we all come out of rainforests, our heritage as human beings, for most of the 250,000 or so years that we've identified ourselves as humans, we lived in life economies. And today, the people in the Amazon rainforest and a few other rainforests are still living that way pretty much. And I want to make it clear here, I don't idealize individual indigenous people. I've been working with these people since the 60s, late 60s, when I was a Peace Corps volunteer, before I became an economic hitman. And incidentally, I thought being an economic hitman was helping save the rainforest at the beginning. That's the perception that's sold to us, of the system is protecting these things. I eventually came to understand that was a lie. But anyway, getting back to these indigenous people, there's angry ones, there's pathological ones, there's crazy ones, and there's brilliant ones and compassionate ones and wonderful ones. As individuals, they're people. But what I really respect is their honoring of the long term, their recognition that they are a part of nature, not apart from nature. And our death economic system, one that I participated in developing as chief economist, is based on the idea that we are a part from nature, that we're kind of like these super beings hovering over nature. And it's really an idea of human supremacy over nature. And that's only been around for the blink of an eye in terms of history. It may have begun a couple of thousand years ago and really come to the surface in the last few decades, but it's recent. And the rainforests part of the importance there is that the indigenous people who live there are trying to tell us that we need to understand that we are a part of nature, as they've always believed, as all of our ancestors believed. And why did we lose sight of that for a few decades in there? I don't know that I have the answer to that question, except materialism became ever stronger. And we focused on things like economic development, especially in the developed world, of the rich getting richer. The tech industry came along and it didn't put much emphasis on rainforests or ecological issues in general. And I think we just really got distracted. And I believe that in a way, the coronavirus has brought us back to an understanding of how connected we all are on this planet. Unlike the other 100-year events that happened every year or so, hurricanes and fires, et cetera, that we could say these just affect local communities. This coronavirus has impacted the whole world. And I think as a result of that, we're beginning to understand better our relationship with the rest of the world. And the rainforests are, as I said before, not only important from the standpoint of creating oxygen and water, fresh water, and absorbing carbon dioxide and other toxins, they're also important because of the symbolism, the mindset they give us. And Annie, I would like to ask you, so you're very involved in using technology and financial systems to protect rainforests. And you've talked, I've heard you talk often about the importance of irrefutable proof that in fact the systems, that the things we're promoting are doing that. How do you provide that? Can you tell us a little bit about this technology and the irrefutable proof?
Well, I'd be happy to, John, and thank you for really explaining why our rainforests are so important. If you haven't actually been to some of the rainforests around the world, I had just the honor and pleasure of traveling with you, John, to a few of our rainforests, including the Amazon, the Ecuadorian Amazon, and it changed my life. And that was part of why I got so deeply involved. Using kind of my background in technology, I've worked across almost every advanced pioneering technology out there. It's just how my brain works. But I've always kind of in my heart, just looked at technology as just an enabler. It's really, how can technology actually empower some really amazing solutions? And, this is also why I got involved with my mentor, Peter Diamandis at Singularity. He's co-founder of Singularity University, and why I got involved with the XPRIZE. And so some of what we're working on at Unity and Unity Labs is how can we take some of these really innovative advanced technologies and actually drive a more scalable model for impact. So one thing that we've been designing and architecting is something we call Impact DAO. And our first use case is a rainforest DAO that's been getting quite a bit of attention. And, and so it's using blockchain technology with a whole other host of really interesting, compelling technologies. But we also, we're building this in community. So, one of our launch partners is the XPRIZE Rainforest, but we're also reaching out to the world and asking for those innovative projects, whether you're using something like IoT sensors, where you can take a project, that is absolutely supposed to be preserving and conserving our rainforests, and provide on the ground proof of that, and be able to connect that into an organizational structure where then fundraisers, investors, even, regular people that want to fund these types of initiatives can see that where my money is going is actually from a traceability perspective. Truly, those dollars are going towards the communities that are on the ground that are truly conserving, preserving, or helping to regenerate our rainforests, or any forest for that matter. And so part of our focus is using a really innovative model called a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. And I won't go into the details of this, but it is a new type of organization that is one of the fastest growing organizations in the world. And we saw, because most of our team were very, very deep in this industry and in this world, we saw an opportunity to be able to architect a new type of DAO that can very easily add in some of these other interesting technologies, including, being able to have live stream proof of impact using potentially drones, potentially new types of drones that there's some exciting organizations out there that are looking at and seeing, can this travel through the rainforest? Can we look at where illegal logging is happening, where oil and gas may be just going in because they can, and have a better ability to not only help those on the ground that are trying to, be the guardians of the rainforest, but also be able to hook that into a global community where groups have agency over their own organization, but we can actually collaborate together. So, part of what we were looking at when we were thinking about an impact DAO and how this works is that we're really, really studying the nonprofit community and the NGO community. And we were asking why there's not more collaboration happening. We're also looking at the very critical and important indigenous communities and why they didn't have direct voices and governance over money that's going to these projects and their lands. And so that's part of what we're trying to work on. We will not finish this project until we have all the important stakeholders that are involved in this entire ecosystem for how we actually drive impact or scalable impact and how we can make a difference. But I will say our goal is to bring at least 80% of the organizations out there that are working on the ground, that are working at bringing money and funding and be able to protect our rainforests together. We are donating this to that community so that not any one organization actually owns this. So that's where it's an interesting model. And our goal is to be able to get to 80% of our rainforests protected and really having that irrefutable proof of impact by 2030. We'd like to do it in 5 years. So we're a little crazy, but that's part of what we're trying to do. So I hope that helps explain it a little bit, John. And I wanted to thank you also for answering a lot of our questions that we send out to you about this, and kind of being an amazing advisor to us. And so, when I think about, these models around sustainability and bringing groups together and all of our stakeholders together, Nathan, I think of you because your powerful film Beyond Zero. I've had so many people talking about this. It moved me so much when I watched it. And I've kind of been in this world for a little while, but it was so moving the way that this was put together within 1 minute, the first minute. And so I was, one of the questions I have to you, and we get this very often, why should this company interface that you highlight in the film, this carpet company in Georgia, and why should anyone in New York City, LA, Paris, why should we care about the rainforest when we have so many problems here on the ground? And, and our companies that are actually putting focus on sustainable impact as the core of their business model, are they really as successful as their traditional counterparts?
Sure, yeah. The if I can use a metaphor here, it's sort of like asking why the stomach should care about the heart, or why the lungs should care about the kidneys. If we separate the whole system and just look at it in its individual parts, that's the problem. None can exist without the whole. And that's why it matters for New York to really care about the rainforest. It's why it matters for a carpet company in Georgia. And the film Beyond Zero, for those that are unfamiliar with Interface and with the story there, it sort of starts in 1994 with the CEO at the time, Ray Anderson, reading one of Paul Hawken's early books, which is called The Ecology of Commerce. And Ray's an engineer, and Paul lays out a very compelling case in that book that all of the life support systems on Earth are in decline, including the rainforests. And Ray's engineer brain just sort of accepted it. He saw it. It became what he called his spear in the chest moment. And so then he faced this decision of, should I pack up my Fortune 500 billion-dollar market-leading carpet company and call it a day, or is there some way forward? And so essentially are we going to go back to pre-industrial life on Earth, which would be a much more sustainable way of living than what we have now? Or is there a way for us to instigate what Ray called a second industrial revolution, to actually get industrial processes in line with the life support systems on Earth? And Ray decided to take a shot at the second one because he thought the first was probably not practical in our world today. So begins a 25-year journey that led Interface to get very, very close now to going beyond zero. The reason I wanted to make the film is because I hadn't heard of any company even striving for what Interface has now effectively been able to do. And so they've reduced their overall greenhouse gas emissions by 96%. Their waste to landfill is down 91%. Their water use is down 80%. All of that saves a lot of money for the company. So there's no trade-off between a profitable, highly efficient business or economy and environmental standards. And frankly, they actually go hand in hand. And so we've seen that from Interface. The movie makes a very compelling case. Interface is now selling a carpet tile product that actually sequesters more carbon than is emitted in its creation. And they're working on this program called Factory as a Forest, where they try to get actual measures of the life support systems and services that a forest renders. Purifying the air, purifying water, providing cooling, providing habitat. And they're trying to figure out what the metrics are on those things, and then get their factories to actually perform the same way. So they get closer and closer and closer to having their factories perform the way that the forest does next door. And that paradigm shift of figuring out how we go from just trying to do less harm, trying to do less bad, to being into a place where we can get in alignment with the life support systems on Earth as an economic system. That's something that is game changing. And I think that's what the film is trying to show companies, that there is a great way to do this that is also profitable. And we see it a lot of times, Annie, there's a lot of different research and evidence that shows that over the long term, to John's point earlier, the short-termism is one of the major challenges we have on this, but over the long term, companies that tend to value, to be egg-headed for a minute, human capital, which is like the health and wellness of human beings, social capital, which is the connectedness of communities, and environmental capital, which is non-toxics, no carbon, water purification, that kind of stuff. Companies that value those three things actually outperform their competition on financial capital over the long term. And so this is a totally viable thing. It absolutely works. And it's just now a race against time for us to be able to say, can we cause this shift in our global economy before we lose the opportunity to do so? So that's the game. And Ani, I love that you guys are talking about 2030. The Paris Accord has companies making major commitments by 2050. That's a huge step forward. But at the time Paris was kind of enacted, that might have been the right date. I'm not sure it is anymore. And I think we really need to be talking about how much can we get done by the end of this decade. And that's a game that everybody needs to be playing. And that's what the 100 Months to Change campaign is all about, is how can we get the solutions that you're talking about, the stuff that John has mentioned, and all of these business things. How far can we get in the 91 months remaining in that 100 months timeline? So anyway, so that's that. And so, John, if I may, I'm really curious. I've talked about a lot of the sort of the private enterprise stuff. What have you seen in terms of what, like, big countries like China and the U.S., other big countries that impact the rainforest in a huge way, Brazil and others? What is kind of the best you've seen in terms of economic policy, other government regulation, and just business initiative? What? Give us some hope here. What do you see?
Well, thanks, Nathan. I've got a book coming out in February that I've been working diligently on, which is about the role that China is playing in the world today, and how China's economic hitmen have learned from the successes and failures of our economic hitmen, including me, and how they are now dominating the world. There's no question China today dominates the world. It is the largest trading partner and the largest investor on every continent, including North America, and some aspects of North America. But the only conclusion that we can come to is that these two countries that represent almost 50% of the world's GDP and almost 50% of the world's carbon dioxide pollution and other forms of pollution, that if we don't come together, these two countries, to change this paradigm of the death economy into a life economy, there's not a lot of hope. These two countries, we can disagree on everything else: religion, culture, the Uyghurs and Thailand and Taiwan and Puerto Rico and Cuba. We can disagree on everything, except let's agree that to survive on a dead planet, you can't survive on a dead planet. And we're creating a dead planet. That's the death economy, that we have to move into this other economic system that, as you pointed out, is still profitable. People can make profits. We can live good lives. It's just we have to have a long-term perspective. So I want to be paid for coming up with a method to mine all the plastic that's in the oceans. Actually, the method's already there. I want to be paid to create a company that does that even better, and to regenerate destroyed environments. All these things that we can do, and we've moved in that direction in such a big way recently, especially before the pandemic, with the idea of conscious capitalism and the Green New Deal, benefit corporations, B corporations. 192 of the world's top CEOs got together in August of 2019 at the Business Roundtable and said, it can no longer be just about maximizing short-term profits. We have to take into account what benefits our communities, our employees and their families, and our customers and their families, the world. But the problem is that these guys are still driven by Wall Street, and any executive who I gotta say, I've met with so many top executives that say, I get children, I get grandchildren, I want my company to be greener, but I know that if I go too far, if I lose short-term profitability, if I lose market share, my major stockholders, which is Wall Street in most cases, will fire me, and they'll replace me with someone who only cares about maximizing profits or market share. So I got to stay in my job and do the best I can. And Nathan, it behooves all of us to understand our important role in this. We are all consumers. Many of us are investors. We're employees. Sometimes we're management. All of us have a role in this. And today, with social networking so available, it's pretty easy to organize a consumer campaign where you write a letter to, you can pick any corporation, whatever corporation you want to see changed. And you write a letter to its CEO saying, hey, CEO of Corporation X, I love your product. I'm not going to buy it anymore until you pay your workers in Indonesia a fair wage, or clean up the pollution you're causing, or whatever your issue is. And say, you know, I'm going to send this letter to all my social networking circles and ask them to send it to all theirs, and they're all going to send you letters. You're going to be overwhelmed by letters saying this. And if you make your changes, you will become a leader in the industry. And you may have to sacrifice short-term profit. Now, you don't want to say this in the letter, but the fact is, like you said, maybe a little sacrifice of short-term profit. That's not a sacrifice. It's an investment in the long term. It's not a cost even. It's an investment. And, you know, if all of us will write these kinds of letters and send them out to corporate executives, and, you know, these executives told me over and over and over again, if I get 100,000 letters demanding that we change, I can take these to Wall Street. I can take these to our investors and tell them, listen, these are our customers. We got to listen. So I think I got off the subject here a little bit, but I want to get off on one more thing. And I want to point out that we have to have a broad perspective of what saving rainforest means. If we're just stopping oil production in rainforest, but we're transferring it to someplace else, that's not successful. But also, we've got to recognize that countries like Brazil, and we can all complain about Bolsonaro, and we should complain about Bolsonaro, but these countries that have incredible resources in these areas that they see as basically without much population, and they also have to take care of the areas that have huge populations, like in Ecuador, for example, the Andes Mountains and the coast, they have some of the most dense populations in the Americas. Their rainforest is half the country, and it's very undensely populated. So the people who live in the densely populated areas, they say, we need better healthcare. We need hospitals. The pandemic just showed us we need hospitals. We need better education. And the only way we're going to get that is by selling our oil in the Amazon. So it also, the responsibility falls on the world to somehow invest in these countries and give them a way, help pay them to keep their rainforest intact. It's a big issue, but I wanted to at least bring it up. and having said all that, you know, I'm struck, Annie, by your involvement in you know, so many of these organizations and companies and these new technology and financial companies. And I wonder, how do you see that ability to scale that up, to make that more impactful, to transfer that model to some of the bigger corporations, to bring that into the broader context of the global world? And as Nathan mentioned, we've got to include China in this.
You know, so John, that's part of, I was thinking a lot about this before I joined kind of our team at Yunity. And, you know, we're Yunity for a reason. A big focus for us is building a scalable model for driving triple bottom line company creation. So, you know, our goal is two things. One is to help enable mindful innovators. And when I say mindful, there is a lot behind that. And we feel, especially coming from the startup industry, I was in Silicon Valley for a very long time, and it's an amazing industry around innovation, but we all know there's been struggles around what happens to these companies. And so much of our focus is, and programming that we're just starting to build, we're pretty new, really is around that mindfulness at the very beginning of creating an organization. So we believe that if we're really going to push the needle and make a difference, we have to start from the beginning. And, you know, because I think Interface is an amazing example, but there's too many examples of the corporations that you talked about, John, where you have boards, you have CEOs that are terrified of what's going to happen, you know, with the analysts, you know, that are coming at them with publicly traded companies. You're only as good as your next quarter and your next announcement. And so what we feel is that if we can help inspire and influence startup founders from the very beginning, I think we all get it. What Nathan keeps talking about and has devoted a good part of his life to building the structures around a sustainable company. I think it's very important for startup founders to understand these companies outperform the other ones by and large. If you actually watch the film Beyond Zero, it is mind-blowing to think of a carpet company saying we're going to help with global climate change, a carpet company. And so kind of coming back to your question, John, we're using very advanced technologies and distributed financial systems to build our scalable models so we can remove all the friction for startup founders actually moving forward with triple bottom line companies. We want to make it so easy, so seamless that it's a given. And we believe this should be the standard organization on the planet, period, moving forward. So we're working very hard at that. There are a lot of technologies involved in it, doesn't matter. Around distributed financial systems, some of our team has been at the very early stages of the cryptocurrency or the Web3 or whatever you want to call it industry. There are some changes needed, and that's why our team helped build one of the most we believe it's the most sustainable blockchain in the world. It is the fastest and the lowest cost blockchain in the world. We'll be announcing that this year. And the idea, and we built it because we weren't seeing what we wanted to see in the industry. But we know that most people in our community believe very strongly in how we can affect change in community. So scalable models, that's what we're really good at. But part of what we're trying to do is kind of translate the language of, a lot of people talk about blockchain and cryptocurrency and decentralized finance and all these things. It's like Latin to most people, unless you've studied Latin. Nobody understands it. So, we have product leaders from, companies like Apple that launched the Apple Watch and, just incredible people that are coming together to help the next generation of founders create these companies, bring us all together in community so we can go quicker, faster, but be able to prove, as we keep saying, irrefutable proof of impact in what we're doing. The other thing is, we got very deeply involved and we've been bringing, people in venture, people from the hedge fund world, the big money people, John, that, that we often talk about, because we wanted to understand, why is the corporate world the way it is? It all goes back to the money, and it all starts with startups. Startups are funded either by really amazing conscious investors, or VCs. And with VCs, everything is about the next, getting your traction, getting to the next funding, getting to an exit, getting to an IPO. And so we're really trying to transform that world. As I said, make it very easy for startup founders to dive into sustainable business. But on top of that, we're creating the distributed financial ecosystem that's part of this, so that more and more investors, regular people in the world, all of us, can help support those companies from the very beginning. That, we believe that's the key. And so that's part of what we're working on. I would love, and speaking about these models and, really putting the work into what does this mean? Nathan, can you tell us more about 100 Months to Change, which I really love this initiative, and, kind of tell us, how can this be a game changer for corporations, that have nothing to do with the rainforest, but getting to the point where they understand, okay, without them, like, we can't breathe any longer, really. Like, the earth will be fine in 1,000 years. We won't be here. And most of us don't want to live on Mars. So Nathan, can you tell us a little bit about this incredible initiative and how this can be a game changer?
Absolutely. So it came from the success of the film. right? And so the film is being taught in business schools all over the world. There's just this incredible resonance, I think, and it's the story. You know, it's Interface's example. It's this hopeful idea that it is not too late. We actually can still do this, and not only that, but we have a pathway, and so that's really resonating. And so I've been contacted by folks from all over the place about how can we use this to figure out what's next, and it sort of started as this. I don't know. I feel like we need to network all of the different people like us that are working on things like this from all over the world, so that we can learn from each other faster, so the whole thing can actually accelerate. And in a way, it's I didn't know what a DAO was before today, but a decentralized autonomous organization. It's built more on those principles, like fungus, instead of like, you know, a hierarchy, so that it can really move fast and it can grow. But it was launched on September 1st of 2020, which was the day that there were 100 months left in the decade. And what we're really trying to do here is to expand the definition of success for capitalism on Earth. John had said that it's that sort of myopic, short-term, money-only focus that is really the biggest problem we face. And I completely agree. Despite the fact that we're showing that business actually performs better when you expand that definition and extend the time horizon, there's a lot of work that needs to happen to sort of flip the way that business education teaches this, to flip the way that CEOs talk about this kind of stuff in their own networks, to get the major consulting firms on board with this kind of stuff, to get the business media sensitive to this. And of course, as you said, to get the capital markets to start to understand this as well, because it's actually a massive risk if a company doesn't have a longer term view. We just need to sort of expand the view. The way that I like to talk about it is there's sort of a 1 or 2 dimensional version of capitalism out there that is the dominant form, that's based on the economics of the middle 1800s, that somehow that model has not been updated yet. But we have everything we need. It's just a communications challenge to get people to create the 3-dimensional version of capitalism that can actually help private enterprise to rise to meet the world's needs, not private enterprise alone, in partnership with governments and with all the great work that NGOs are doing. But those folks are already doing a lot of the good work. It's private enterprise that really needs to step up in this moment. And so 100 Months to Change is really focused on figuring out how we do that. There's a lot of work, a lot of really brilliant things, a lot of great models and techniques that are already being deployed all over the world. That it is happening, right? The progress is being made. It's just a matter of, can we stitch this together so that we can learn about the great things that are happening from our colleagues all around the world, instead of having to make mistakes that they already made and overcame, because we need to accelerate. And so that's what it is. 100monthstochange.com. There is a global call that happens once a month that is just an opportunity for people to get together and share. But a couple of highlights. There's a woman named Francisca Lorraine that is a big branding consultant out of Chile. And she started participating with us, maybe 6 months ago or so. And she now has gotten the 4 biggest radio stations in Chile, several of the major business organizations in Chile, all excited about this possibility. As you know, Chile is in a place of tremendous flux right now. It's very unstable, but all of these folks are sort of seeing the writing on the wall, and they're saying, we want to figure out how we can lead on this. Because as you both said, there are CEOs that wish they could do more. Right? It's just, there's this weird thing where they wish they could do more. Most employees wish their company was doing more. It's just that there's some of these systems, like the way that boards are staffed and controlled, the way the investor community is controlled. But if you start to create this, like, hey, we all want the same thing in private. We're just afraid that if we come out with it, we're going to get hit by all these other people. There's very, very soon going to be a tipping point where we can go ahead and come out, and everybody can realize that they've got a majority on the board. They've got a majority in their shareholders, and they can actually be much, much more ambitious on all this kind of stuff. But again, the more we're networked, the more we collect the stories, tell these inspirational ideas of how this kind of change happens, the safer it becomes for, real sober business people to actually give a damn about the rest of it.
Very well
So,
said, Nathan.
and John, I just got to ask, when we look at this, my world is tangential to rainforest stuff in particular. It has massive implication because of all the ways that our global economy actually drives deforestation in a lot of different ways. But there are really interesting models, public-private partnerships, different business models that really are ending deforestation. And again, I would just be really curious, what's the coolest thing that you've seen? What's the best model to end deforestation now?
Well, I've got to go back to the Achua people of the Ecuadorian Amazon. When I was a Peace Corps volunteer with their neighbors, the Shuar, back in the late 80s, the Achua were uncontacted. They were considered to be, just totally out there. But they now have taken a huge leadership role, and they're taking their model to the world of how to stop deforestation. And what really happened was in the 90s, they understood that their neighbors were no longer their enemies. So for years, hunters and gatherers, because they need large territories they have to protect, the Achua were at war with the Shuar and with the Quechua and the Warani and on and on. They realized in the 90s that the enemy was the oil companies, because they'd seen the destruction in the northern Ecuadorian Amazon. And so they helped create a system to bring together in federations all the indigenous people to stand in unison against the development of these territories and for oil. And then they realized that the real problem was not the oil companies, it was the dream, as they put it, of the people who demand oil, us. And so they realized that what they had to do is come together with us in some form to change that dream. And they invited me in and asked and begged me, pleaded with me. I tried to resist, it seemed like too big a project, pleaded with me to make such a thing happen. And that's when out of that grew the Pachamama Alliance. As Annie mentioned earlier, I'm a co-founder along with Bill and Lynn Twist of the Pachamama Alliance. And the idea there being to change the dream of the modern world, to change the dream from one of extreme materialism to one that recognizes the long-term necessity of being a part of nature, not apart from nature. And as a result, there's been no roads, there's been no development within Achua territory and many of the neighboring territories. They very much have halted deforestation in that area as a result of this. And at the same time, they've invited in tourism, like ecotourism. We, Pachamama Alliance, we take groups in there. And they've realized that in order to encourage people to come in, they've got to become more vegetarians. They've got to stop eating meat and killing animals because people want to see animals. For a long time, we go to this lodge that we built back in the late 90s, and the animals they built actually back in the late 90s, and we take people to, and you didn't see jaguars and you didn't see the wild boars or any of these animals. Now you do, because they stopped hunting. And just the last time I was there, I nearly crashed into a jaguar swimming in the river. I was in a kayak and nearly hit her. I had to back paddle not to. So there's a great model there that's being shown. But I think the most important aspect of that model is, in a way, what we've all been talking about here is the change of the paradigm. Change of the dream, as they put it. By dream, they mean paradigm, they mean mindset. To get us out of this mindset of short-term ravaging and into a mindset of long-term survivability. So I think that's the best example. There's many others, but I love that one because it gets into the mindset.
I think it gets into the hearts.
Yes. The heart and mind, they got to be one, and they got to come together. The eagle and the condor. The whole prophecy of these people is that this is the time when we have to bring heart and mind together. And many people would say, so the indigenous people really come more from the heart, and that's not entirely true. They're very, very smart. They're very smart and incredible in their environments. And that we are the people, we only come from our minds, and that's not true either. There's a lot of us who come from our hearts, a lot of artists and writers and filmmakers who are coming from the heart, but there's an imbalance. And so bringing these two together is so important.
Thanks for that, John. And so, I want to share a game changer before we kind of close today. Really thinking about our Indigenous communities. And, I recently had the pleasure of meeting with a founder of Root Studio, Rebecca Hui, who really wished that she could have made it today, but we'll have her on another one of our Think Tank series. And what they have done to team up with Indigenous communities, talking about, the heart and the mind, the eagle and the condor coming together, I think it's groundbreaking, because often, when we've traveled and spoken with Indigenous community leaders, whether they're in the rainforest or protecting other really important lands, they talk about, tell people about us, bring people here, and not everyone can get there. Plus, we may not want to get on a plane, and use up more carbon. But what they've done is they are honoring Indigenous cultures and their design work. The artistry is extraordinary, and they are taking, these Indigenous artists, kind of heritage, honoring this, providing trademark, copyright, and licensing. And they've turned around and they are then taking that and licensing this out to some of the biggest fashion brands in the world. This is just a start. And then that money flows back to the Indigenous people, and it helps enable them. As you said before, John, they need schools, they need education. And so, we're in discussions to see where this model can go. But if you get a chance, look up Root Studio. We'll have links later. I think they're fantastic, and it's a model that I'm very excited about. And so, I think now we're gonna have closing comments. I'd really love to ask both of you, John and Nathan, what are your parting comments to the community at large? This event reached 29 million people last year. We're expecting far more people to get involved this year. What are your parting comments? How do we end deforestation? How do you help inspire future game changers? We'll start with you, Nathan. How about that?
I think the thing that everybody needs to realize is how much agency they have. John had talked about the sort of the simple act of writing a letter to a corporation as an act, the scale that he said is definitely something that is very important. But I will say that the interface story began with one person who happened to be working as a consultant, but he wouldn't let his client order interface carpet because they couldn't give him a good answer about where they were on the environment. And that one thing is the thing that set in motion a complete transformation of a company. It took 25 years, but that was then. Now we have the ability for companies to be able to shift much, much, much faster. And so between that act as a consumer of doing that stuff, you also have a great deal of agency as an employee, or if you're a business leader, then it really is on your shoulders right now to have the courage to lead this. But even if you're not a business leader, inside of a company, you can be an intrapreneur and begin to really explore where there are these opportunities. There's a woman named Leith Sharp. If you happen to be an intrapreneur, Google her and her executive education course at Harvard. It is the most incredible framework I've ever seen for how you lead change from within an organization or inside of a city. So if you would like to take this on and get some real training, it's the best thing I've ever seen. And then finally, we also have to realize that many of the people that would be watching this, I assume, might have some investments themselves. And even if you're just part of your 401k, figuring out what you're invested in and making sure that you align that with your values, and the normal sort of ESG screens are awful. They are screening for the worst practices. It takes a lot of research and a lot of intention. But if you can try to make sure that you're invested along with where your values are, and you're divesting from the things, and a lot of this can just be, hey, I'm an investor, and I want to know where you are on that, right? That thing is another letter that you can write. But I guess it's just the agency, my friends. I think a lot of times we see what's happening, you look at the news, and you feel hopeless. I was in a state of that this morning as I was looking at different things going on. But there's some, I forget who said this, but I love it, that what is happening on Earth right now in any given day is a book that's 3 feet thick. And then the news, what you're seeing is just that first quarter inch, and it tends to be the most alarming quarter inch because they're trying to sell something, right? But the rest of it is progress. It is hopeful. It is incredible. And we need to be part of that. We need to recognize how powerful we actually are. And get after causing this transformation that we've been talking about. And that is what needs to happen. And that's what we can all do. And we all need to do it this decade. Those would be my closing comments.
Well said, Nathan. John.
Well, I think Nathan's really said it all. You hit the nail on the head, Nathan. And I would just add that I think we should all feel that we are very blessed to be alive at this time. You know, every major culture, we talked about the eagle and the condor, but every culture around the world has a prophecy. The Mayan prophecy of 2012, which is very optimistic, unlike what Hollywood wanted to tell us. The Jewish prophecy, the Islamic prophecy, the Christian prophecy, all these prophecies tell us that we have arrived at a time of incredible opportunity to change and the necessity to change. And the prophecies don't say we're going to change. They say if we don't change, we're going to have big problems. And we're seeing this hugely. And but they also say that we can create the change. We can bring the eagle and the condor can come together to create a new consciousness and an offspring, which is a new consciousness, a higher consciousness of what it means to be a part of nature, not apart from nature. So everyone listening should feel very, very blessed to be alive at this time and to have the opportunity to participate in this phenomenal, this dream-changing moment of human history. We are at an incredibly important, pivotal time, and we ought to have fun making the change. You know, it's there's always a little drudgery. You know, there's parts of writing I don't like as much as others, but I love to write. You know, you cook a great meal, you got to wash the dishes afterwards. So there's always a few things, but you got to focus on the ones that really focus on the deliciousness of the food. And as we move into life, I just encourage all of you to just become part of this incredible movement, because nothing will make you happier. Nothing will bring you greater joy than to create a world that our children and grandchildren, children and grandchildren of all species will look back and say, thank you, people. Thank you. Thank you for taking this opportunity and doing the right thing. And thank you all for being, thank the two of you for being on this with me, and thank everybody who's listening. And I know we're all going to do it together. I'm excited. This is an exciting time.
Oh my goodness, John. Well, thank you so much, John Perkins. Just so beautifully said. I have very little to say after that. Nathan Havey, thank you so much. The work you're doing is incredibly important. We are going to provide links. So just, you know, stay on and just see the links to all the organizations that we've talked about. I want to thank the entire community that came together to watch us today. We're going to have a little Q&A afterwards, and we'll provide a link to that. We are doing some incredible things, not only at Singularity and our community, so please get involved. It's open to everyone. At Unity and Unity Labs, we're doing a lot of the things we're talking about. We are building platforms and we are trying to bring as much community to be part of that. So if you want to get involved in some of the projects we're talking about, Rainforest DAO, this is all about doing this and building this in community. There's a really interesting social impact platform that we're taking a very different twist at. We have a lot of people from the gaming industry and gamers that are part of this because we want to have fun, like you said, John, but we want to help those corporations make change. So it's a really interesting twist to what we're trying to do. So if you're interested, please reach out and get involved. And upcoming, we have our keynote for World Rainforest Day. And this is going to be really interesting. It's one of your good friends, John Perkins. Steve Donziger will be talking about so much in that work that he has done and what has been going on with him. So I hope everyone, please join the keynote right after this. Thank you all for joining. We really appreciate it.